Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to continue with EIGRP. If you take a look at the top of the document, you see a summary of the topics that were covered in a live study session a while ago. Since then, I've covered classic mode and name mode and dynamic and static neighbors in separate videos. So in this video, we'll focus on passive interface. Before we look at the configuration, let's go to the topology because I've changed a couple of things here. So previously I've used R1, R2, and R3. However, for the purposes of this video, R3 has been turned off and R4 is used instead. This is so I can show the behavior of the passive interface command in more detail. Okay, let's go back to Notepad. So this is essentially what has been configured on the devices so far, although some configuration has been removed. For example, previously R1 and R3 were configured as static neighbors, as stated here. Now that configuration is gone from R1, and again, we're not using R3 in this lab. R2 is configured as shown below here. And this is actually the configuration on R3. Minus the static neighbor configuration. Anyway, we don't have to worry about that because R3 is not used. So for this video and the passive interface configuration, we'll configure passive interface in classic mode on R1 and then in named mode on R4. Now let's jump to Cisco documentation. So here I still have the EIGRP configuration guide, and actually it's the other tab. So here are the configuration examples for EIGRP parameters. And you notice here that passive interface is included in both classic mode and named mode. However, this is not entirely correct, as we'll see shortly. So let me actually go to the master command list right here, so we'll see how to use the passive interface command. So let's start by looking at what the passive interface command actually does. So let's read the description here. So to suppress EIGRP hello packets and routing updates on interfaces while still including the interface addresses in the topology table, use the passive interface command. So in other words, when passive interface is enabled, hello or update messages will not be sent or received on that interface. But the network itself is still included in EIGRP update messages sent to other neighbors. So EIGRP cannot form neighbor relationships on passive interfaces. Therefore, it will also not send or receive EIGRP updates on that interface. Next, if we look at the command syntax here, you'll see that it states that the default keyword here is optional. So how it's written here, it looks like this command alone is enough. That's how it was shown in the configuration examples as well. However, when we go to the command line, we should see an error message that it's an incomplete command. So you need to specify either the default, which means all interfaces are passive interfaces by default, or you need to define a specific interface. That's actually a great segue to the next thing that we need to talk about. So there's really two ways that you can configure the passive interface. I like to think of it as strict and loose options. So for the strict option, you use passive interface default, and like I said, all interfaces are passive interfaces by default. Or in the loose option, you specify the passive interfaces separately and individually. Let's scroll down the document a little bit to look at the usage guidelines. And actually pay attention here as well. Hello packets and routing updates are sent and received on the interface. That's the default for the command. And here you see another description of the passive interface command. So use the passive interface command to select interfaces that will not form EIGRP neighbor adjacencies, yet include the interface addresses in the EIGRP topology database. And here is how you use the passive interface default command. So the default keyword sets all interfaces to passive. Individual interfaces can be specified to override the default passive interface state by using the no passive interface command. So here you see the example. Okay, let's go back to Notepad. So on R1 in classic mode, we'll do passive interface default and then no passive interface to define where we want to enable EIGRP and allow EIGRP neighbor adjacencies and those updates to be sent and received. So let's do it here. Passive interface default. And then we want to do no passive interface gig 0/0, like that. Let me actually just copy the passive interface default command for now. And we'll go on R1. Let's wake it up. And let's just look at the current EIGRP status. So show IP EIGRP neighbor to see what's going on here. So you see R1 and R2 are still neighbors. Now when I run the passive interface default command, this neighbor adjacency will actually go down. Let's see that happen before I issue the no passive interface command. Oh, and actually I also have a Wireshark packet capture running in the background on R1 gig 0/0 interface. So you see all those hello packets coming and going right now. So let's take a look at this as well after I issue the command. So let's go under the routing process, router EIGRP 12, and passive interface default. Let's see what happens. You see the neighbor adjacency instantly went down, and this even tells us why. Interface is passive. Okay, let's see if we can find any differences in the Wireshark packet capture. Well, hellos are still incoming from R2 if you look at this. So the source is from 192.168.255.2. That's R2. So if we take a look at this here, show IP interface brief. So this is the IP address of R2. So R2 is still sending hello packets to R1, but R1 is not receiving them. And it's not sending them either. You see there's no source 192.168.255.1. Okay, let's close out from this. Let's go here. So now we can run the no passive interface command from here. Let's copy this. Like that. Now R1 and R2 are neighbors again. Show IP EIGRP neighbor. Okay, let's think about the configuration for R4 then. So let's go back to Notepad. Let me actually copy this and verify that there is nothing on R4 at the moment. No, that's good. So let's go back to Notepad and we'll use named mode on R4. So let's do router EIGRP and then the instance name trying to come up with something creative again. I'm going to use HEDWIG because Harry Potter is on TV tonight and it's on my mind. So we'll go with that. Then address family, IPv4, autonomous system number is 12. And then we need to enable the network command. So 192.168.255 and 0. Let me put some space here. And actually, I want to do another network command. So I've actually configured two interfaces on R4. Show IP interface brief. So I've set an IP address here as well, so we can use the passive interface command on this interface. So if we go back, we can do network 192.168.45.0. Oh, and I actually forgot to show the passive interface incomplete command. So let's do that now. So passive interface. Actually, is it under the address family configuration? Let's just look at the configuration example quickly. Let's go over here. Yeah, actually, I don't think I can show it in named mode. Okay, we'll do that at the end. Sorry for the confusion. So let's just change this because this is actually wrong. So we need to go under the interface configuration. So AF interface gig 0/1 and then passive interface. I believe it's like that. Let's just double check. Yes, right here. Okay, let's copy this. And then go on R4. Like so, now you see that more EIGRP neighbor adjacencies came up. Show IP EIGRP neighbor. So that's R1 and R2. And now if we look at the EIGRP topology table, show IP EIGRP topology, you can see that this network is here even though it was configured as passive interface. Actually, we can probably see that update message in the Wireshark packet capture if I'm not too late yet. There's a bunch of hellos, but if we scroll up, we should see the update messages being exchanged. So let's have a look here. Something sourced from R4 and sent to R1. Let's have a look here. Not this one. This one possibly. Coming from R4. And yes, this is where it is advertised. So that's the network connecting to R5 in the topology. The other side is not configured, but the interfaces are up. So this network is included in the EIGRP topology table. And it is advertised to those EIGRP neighbors, R1 and R2. Now finally, let me show you the incorrect syntax. Let's go on R1. I don't really need to change any configuration here. I'll just show you that it doesn't work. So conf t router EIGRP 12 and then passive interface. You see it doesn't work. It's an incomplete command. One last thing, let's verify all the configuration that we have on each router. So let's take this command, show run section router EIGRP. And let's just run this on all devices. So there we go. On R1, we did passive interface default and then no passive interface gig 0/0. R2, we didn't really touch in this lab, but I can run the command nonetheless. Like so. And then finally on R4, this is what we have. So that's how you configure passive interface in EIGRP Classic and named mode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.